Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 terrible, awful, abysmally dreadful games to ever grace the original Sony PlayStation.
Something exciting, with aliens.
Is that all you think about, Buster?
Number 20, Digimon World 2. Can understand why some Digimon fans might have gravitated towards this game when they were kids. It's a dungeon crawler with your favorite digital monsters. That's all a kid could want. Well, ideally yes, but the problem with Digimon World 2 is just how slow the entire game plays. Every battle takes forever to load in and out of, with every single action taking so much time to execute before the next move comes in to eat up more time. It's enough to scare off anyone who isn't familiar with turn-based RPGs, and it might have pushed some to flee back to the first Digimon world, which that too was not as exciting as it should have been. Number 19, Spawn the Eternal. There were plenty of awesome action games that let you take control of fearsome creatures. Spawn the Eternal was not one of those games. On paper, this should have been a game where you get to use all of the crazy weapons at Spawn's disposal to fight hordes of demons and eventually take down Malboja. Instead, we got a game with tons of corridors, bland rooms, chunky combat, and some of the worst controls we had ever experienced on the PlayStation 1. Spawn deserved way better than whatever Eternal was supposed to be. Number 18, Arthur Ready to Race.
Sure is a quiet day. I wish we had something to do.
Yeah.
We tend to avoid putting games aimed at little kids on lists like this, but Arthur Ready to Race is a unique case. While the cover of the game implies that this is a racing game, you'd quickly find out that racing isn't even a fraction of the game. Most of it is spent wandering around and playing minigames in order to obtain parts for your cart. And even when you collect all the parts, the race turns out to be a solo downhill derby with absolutely no challenge injected into its gameplay whatsoever. Should an Arthur fan spend the 40 minutes it takes to beat the whole game? Absolutely not. Number 17, Army Men 3D. In all honesty, there were a few solid games starring our green little Army Men. Unfortunately, Army Men 3D was not among those solid games. Much of the vitriol towards it can be attributed to two things: the camera and the checkpoint system. It can be difficult to spot enemies from a distance far enough to take cover. The thing is that by the time you spot an enemy, they've already begun firing at you or maybe have killed you, sending you back to the very beginning of the mission. Yeah, we can already hear the legions of kids throwing controllers or simply ejecting the disc from their consoles. Number 16, Beyblade Let It Rip. Much like Digimon World 2, if you were a Beyblade fan back in the day, maybe you found some enjoyment with this title, and that's a strong maybe. Most folks walked away with a negative perception of Beyblade because of this game though. So much time in Let It Rip is spent setting up and preparing for matches, and when you do get some semblance of gameplay, it's over in a matter of seconds. Beyblade told us to let it rip, we did, and just like a fart in the wind, it disappeared from our minds as if it never happened. Number 15, Dragonheart Fire and Steel. Now, some folks may have enjoyed the 1996 film Dragonheart for its fantastical premise and visual effects. As for the video game, we've yet to meet anyone who's actually liked it. Dragonheart Fire and Steel was like a kid turning in their homework at the last minute. Stock sound effects, stiff animations that felt unfinished, everything on display felt like the game had a budget of $20 and a lunch. We won't pretend that Dragonheart was a great Game of the Year contender for 1996, but surely developer Funcom, yeah, that Funcom, the one we know for the Conan the Barbarian video games, they could have done so much better than this. Number 14, Rascal Racers. With the new and DVD gaming console hybrid floundering in sales, it was time for Motorola, Samsung, Toshiba, and RCA to figure out how to recoup costs. One of their solutions was to bring one of their own games, Rascal Racers, to the PS1. What a mistake that was. Not only does Rascal Racers fail to have an original bone in its poorly assembled body, it's a game haphazardly thrown together with minimal music, uninspired courses, and some of the slowest gameplay ever seen in a racing game. Rip in peace, Nguyen. The ports couldn't save you there. Number 13. Resident Evil Survivor.
So this is where the city is controlled from.
On paper, a Resident Evil light gun game could absolutely work for the franchise, but the technology wasn't quite there yet for home consoles, not for the year 2000 at least, which is why Resident Evil Survivor is often regarded as one of the worst PS1 games and one of the worst Resident Evil games. The long loading screens were already making Survivor a miserable experience. Regardless if you use the PS1 controller or a peripheral, you are often subjected to extremely inaccurate and sometimes unresponsive controls. Maybe we can see Capcom eventually return to this idea now that the technology is vastly improved compared to when Survivor launched.
It's still alive!
Number 12. Star Wars Masters of Teras Kasi.
Fight!
Masters of Teras Kasi might be the most confusing Star Wars product in the franchise's gaming career. Just a few fights might be enough for you to start asking some serious questions. How can Boba Fett and Chewbacca take multiple hits from a lightsaber while everyone else is immediately dead? Who is Jodo Kast and Arden Lin? And what the actual Phantom Menace is a Teras Kasi? All valid questions, but ultimately, this is just a dumb fighting game with awful controls, movement that's way too slow, and almost no room to pull off even a small combo. A Star Wars fighting game can work, but not like this. Number 11. WCW Backstage Assault.
He's got him on the run now!
This may not be the worst wrestling game ever on the PlayStation 1, but it's sure as hell one of the worst wrestling games affiliated with WWE. We'll give it credit as one of the first WWE games to include divas as playable characters. However, that doesn't excuse the piss-poor quality. Assuming you can get through the confusing menu layout and navigations, you'll find that WCW Backstage is vehemently broken with easy-to-spam moves, slow animations, and borderline unfair stats between wrestlers. Speaking on that, each wrestler has looked significantly better in other wrestling games both before and after Backstage Assault's conception. So what happened here?
Right now, he must be wondering, what have I gotten myself into?
Number 10. Pepsi Man. Unsurprisingly, given the title of the game, this was more of an interactive ad for the soft drink rather than a proper video game. With bizarre humor and even weirder live-action cutscenes, the faceless Japanese Pepsi mascot runs around various environments trying to avoid different obstacles. This is all in aid of solving some Pepsi-themed problem like an empty vending machine or helping a thirsty soldier. If you're a devout supporter of Pepsi, then this may just be the game for you. But the gameplay is so bad, you might want to switch to Coke. Number 9. The Simpsons Wrestling.
1, 2, 3.
Many licensed games often slack with the quality as they rely on the profile of the show or film they're based on to distract from the poor gameplay. Such was the case with this awful wrestling game that's been labeled as one of the ugliest games ever. The gameplay is similarly hard to watch as the collision detection is almost non-existent and the movesets are woefully limited. It could have been so much fun to play, but such poor execution for a basic game premise makes it a struggle to play.
1, 2.
Number 8. Hellboy Asylum Seeker. A A PC version of this game was released to critical disdain in the year 2000, so when the same action game was ported to the PS1 4 years later, there was an understandably negative reaction. The graphics were incredibly outdated for its era, and the whole game was simply a misguided attempt to write off the back of the release of the first Hellboy film released the same year. The controls were almost unfathomable, and too few people were familiar with the character at the time to ever give it a chance of success.
That's a lot of blood.
Too much blood.
Number 7. Rascal. The thought process for the publishers at the time for this game must have been, how about we copy every other 3D platformer from this era, but this time, make it look bad. Looking to ride the coattails of far more successful games like Super Mario 64, Rascal was a poor imitation if there ever was one. The camera had a mind of its own, and the controls were so poor that most of the time, it's up to the will of the Rascal gods to where you actually end up. Number 6. Fantastic Four.
Human Torch. Flame on!
It seems like the first superhero family have always been cursed when it comes to any sort of digital media. Once you start the game, the problems become apparent almost immediately, thanks to control response time issues, hilariously bad character animations, lack of combat variety, and some of the most irritating sound effects to come from the console. Its storyline lacked any sort of substance, and your foes were sometimes inexplicably hard to beat. If you managed to grind your way through the game and want more punishment, then be sure to watch the 2015 film featuring the quartet for maximum nightmare fuel. Number 5. Mortal Kombat Special Forces. A game that's so bad that even series creator Ed Boon doesn't want to acknowledge its existence. Mortal Kombat Special Forces is a game that had a really troubled development history, and it shows. First problem, despite this spin-off focusing on the Special Forces taking on Kano's Black Dragon, the game lacks a pivotal character, Sonya Blade, so instead, we're stuck with Jax. Secondly, the iconic hand-to-hand combat the series is well known for is not only terrible, but also undermined by the extensive use of firearms. We could go on about the horrid level design and terrible story, but that would require a list of its own.
I know exactly what I'm gonna do with this thing.
Number 4. London Racer. If you've ever been to London, then you'll know that there are almost as many cars as people. Traffic is everywhere, and this racing title ignored the one thing that could have distracted from its awful collision detection and short completion length. Having Mini Coopers smash into each other on the streets of England's capital could have been great, but there's barely another soul on the tarmac. Adding to this is a laughably short draw distance and strange visual aberrations galore. No fun at all. Number 3. Santa Claus Saves the Earth. It's unclear how many Christmases were ruined for kids who received this painfully slow platformer, but no doubt Saint Nick himself would be upset by the quality of this title. The player must help Santa Claus escape from his imprisonment in some unspecified magic lands, but after about 10 minutes of playing, you'll want to leave him there and get as far away as possible from this abysmal game. It boasts awful graphics and laborious gameplay where every boss battle takes place on the exact same level. Despite this, it's almost worth a play to see a front-flipping Father Christmas. Number 2. Barbie Explorer.
This will make an incredible story for the paper.
What happens when you take the rolling movements of Lara Croft, levels that seemed ripped out of Crash Bandicoot, all while trying to mimic the charm of Indiana Jones using one of the most vapid dolls in existence? A disaster that defies explanation. It could have worked well as a simple platform game, but instead, the bad camera angles and incredibly clunky controls make navigating the repetitive landscape an arduous task. It is wholly unoriginal and a sloppily created adventure as lifeless as the doll that serves as your protagonist.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure to go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1. Bubsy 3D. This 3D platformer truly is an attack on almost all of your senses. Every level is as ugly and fluorescent as the one before, the controls are completely random, and every sound grinds on you like nails down on a chalkboard. Worst of all is Bubsy's horrible personality. He's whiny and arrogant, so it's no surprise that the random assortment of enemies are trying to kill him. Every attempt at humor fails embarrassingly flat, meaning it has almost no redeeming features whatsoever. It's definitely well worth its infamy as one of the worst games ever. What's the worst PlayStation 1 game you've played? Did it make our list? Let us know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.